So given that, let's then turn our attention and look at what we've done to our core reference librarians. And, when we put those together, the intersection of that librarianship, but it's also a mission. What is the mission of a librarian? This is mine. The mission of a librarian is to improve society through facilitating knowledge creation in their communities. And there are lots of parts to that. But you'll notice that this fits really nice with Joyce Valenza, who talked yesterday about knowledge, not only discovery, but production. And it's a couple of things to point out. First of all, it's the mission of librarians, not the mission of a library, because all a library is a place, an org chart that can decay and fall down. It takes people to make things happen. When you walk into a library, you go, our library website sucks. Do you work at the library? Yes, it's your fault. That this is a personal responsibility that we bring to these things, that people make things happen. The other thing I'd like to point out is a two-part mission. The second part, facilitating knowledge and the creation of the communities, we do really well. We like that. It's nice. It's safe. The first part about improved society is a moral counterbalance to that. It says that you can't, it solves Eli Nyberger's pie and prostitutes problem, which is the famous Eli Nyberger's pie and prostitutes problem, which is when he asked patrons, how could the library be better? It was like, you could provide more pie and prostitutes. And if you want to raise usage statistics, so probably skew the profile a little bit about who's coming in, that might do it. So there's a point where we say these are things that we are not going to do. This is, within the community, we have the not only do no harm, but make things better. And Joe talked yesterday about this interesting push and pull about shaping the community and helping the community shape itself. So now, given this mission, let's go take a look at our core reference librarian. And the reason I say our core reference librarian is, here's our reference librarian, and they're in a nice environment. And the first thing we've said is, well, the collections don't matter, so we take those away. Right? Because the truth is that what you have on your shelves is irrelevant. You have the entire internet to bring to it. You can bring all these other resources to it. So that's not uniquely referenced. There's no such thing as a reference collection anymore because everything's full text accessible. Google handles a lot of that stuff. Stick with me for a minute. The next thing we know is that the notion of word reference is horrible, so we need to take that away too. Because it's overloaded, what are we referring people to? Isn't this about questions and answers? Is it a book of material? Is it people talking? And then, of course, what we've just heard is we need to take the desk away. So here we've left the librarian sort of standing out in the field going, go do reference. And no wonder there's a huge amount of insecurity and questions about where do we go. But my argument is that is actually reference. And that's always been the most important reference. And I want to just walk you through why I think that. So if you look at what is the role of the reference librarian in this environment, in standing there without a desk before them, without materials around them, and you say, what is ultimately your task? The task is, we go back to the mission, facilitating conversations. So those conversations may be among teens looking for after-school activities or things to do. Those tasks may be among the business community, wondering how they start up a new business or entrepreneurship. It may be among students wondering what college to take and will I ever be able to pay off these loans. It may be families. We have a really great example with mothers clubs, moms clubs who come together and say, how can we find activities? How can we find good health information? How can we find all good parenting information to come about? And throughout all of this, the reference library needs to be embedded in these tasks. Not waiting for questions from, but truly understanding the environment that these people are in and understanding the task they want to solve. And so, yes, one thing that librarians can do about this is that they can help them find resources and materials. So yes, they can go about and they can connect them to, here's some movies and here's some DVDs and here's some CDs and all this wonderful stuff. And in fact, this is really where reference started, which was the ultimate goal was for us to attach a person to a thing and walk away. But that's still there. But what's much more interesting is looking now in this true social context, which is people discovering and building information through conversations. We can start talking about connecting people to people in looking across these conversations. So in an academic setting, right now the big thing is interdisciplinary communication. What unit on an academic campus is better situated to find out where the intersections of different topics and people and questions and resources? And we're building questions and answers together. Now, the other thing I'd like you to note about this is that the librarian facilitating and being part of this is not just nice foo-foo words. And this is where I want to be really clear. It'd be nice to say, oh, librarians facilitate conversations. Yay! And oh, they need to be part of conversations. Yay! Right? But what does that mean? Right? What are the damn standards? Where can we put the worksheet behind this? How can we turn this into a curriculum? And what I'm very interested in is how do we turn this into tools to do our job better? And so there is more to this than simply saying, go talk to people. We have to talk about how to plan, how do we identify those conversations, how do we identify regularities in those conversations. One of the questions going, if you're working with a lawyer, to understand what that lawyer has to do with the whole process, not just when they stop to ask you a question, but truly understand the law. To map those conversations within a community to find out in central Philadelphia, what are the major concerns going on? What's the big topics? How can we understand those? Not by asking, how can the library be helpful to you? But say, what are you talking about? And from what you talk about, we can then begin to align our resources to it. It's the same thing as curriculum mapping in K-12, and which we should do in higher education as well. When an engineering student walks in, we should understand what they have to do to graduate at some point to answer that one reference question. I'm guessing that had something to do with the curricular side, but I could be wrong. Okay. The other thing is that this is, for those nerds among us, if you look at that, that's a topology. A topology means that it's a set of items that are interrelated and the relations between them. So in maps, it's the idea of how different spaces are connected through altitude, or maps, roads, and places. And what's interesting is this graph I just brought up is actually a topology that's talked about in PageRank, Google's famous PageRank, which is Google's great big advance over Alta Vista and its competitors at the time was to realize that they weren't dealing with a corpus of documents, of blocks of text lying in space. They were dealing with a map. They were dealing with a topology where things were connected to other things. And then it turns out that those connections are a remarkably good crutch to lean on for things like relevance. Popularity turns out, for a lot of stuff, to be pretty close to relevance. Not all things, but for many. And if we took a look at this topology for pages, imagine what happens if we looked at this topology of questions, answers, resources, peoples, and conversation. Because we can, in fact, build a like topology around concepts like question topologies and reference topologies and a system that we loosely refer to as reference weighting. That we can take this idea, hopefully, there we go, and we can say, well, here are sites out on the net, and this is how different reference interactions refer to those sites. So what does that give us? Well, not only does it give us the famous popularity thing, here are the sites that librarians like, and if librarians are credible agents, we can kind of assume that they're pointing to credible sites. But we have an amazing amount of context around that, because what we, as librarians, do very well is not identify good information and bad information. What we do very well is to identify good information and bad information for a given question, for a given context, for a given need. And so by taking the whole reference transactions, the questions, the understanding, the text, the pictures, the links, together, we can understand when these are good sites, in what context. Simply imagine going through the archives of your virtual reference, pulling all the URLs out, and coming up with a weighted list. Now imagine attaching to that weighted list of URLs the different keywords and resources that go along with it. And now imagine that in a very rich taxonomy, and pardon me while I geek out, but RDF schemas that we can navigate and we can use in contextual web designs and semantic web applications, life gets cool. Because now we have this really squishy thing called conversations that we can bend and apply great little things like formulas to, and different algorithms to sort through that information. And you go, well, dang, why bother? Don't hurt me.